Welcome to Puzzle Proof. Join us as we unravel today's captivating story and solve exciting puzzles together. Get ready to engage your mind. Let the journey start. Chapter 1. An Unexpected Invitation. Hercule Poirot had long relished the tranquility of retirement, his days filled with the meticulous care of his garden and the occasional indulgence in a fine mystery novel. Yet, on a crisp autumn morning in London, as golden leaves danced along the cobbled streets, an unexpected invitation arrived that piqued his renowned curiosity. The envelope was of the finest cream parchment, embossed with an elegant crest depicting a lion entwined with ivy. Poirot recognized it immediately. Lady Beatrice Whitcomb, a name that resonated with both grace and enigma within the upper echelons of society. He sat in his study, the aroma of freshly brewed Earl Grey enveloping him, and carefully opened the invitation. "Cher Monsieur Poirot, I trust this letter finds you in good health and high spirits. I find myself in a most distressing situation and believe that your exceptional talents are indispensable to resolving it. Please honour me with your presence at Whitcomb Manor at your earliest convenience. Yours sincerely, Lady Beatrice Whitcomb." Intrigued by the formality and urgency of the request, Poirot felt a familiar spark of excitement. Despite his comfortable retirement, his innate desire to solve mysteries remained undiminished. After a moment's contemplation, he decided to accept the invitation. The journey to Whitcomb Manor was a pleasant one, the countryside bathed in the soft hues of autumn. As Poirot approached the grand estate, its imposing facade came into view, framed by towering oak trees and meticulously maintained gardens. The manor exuded an air of timeless elegance, its ivy-clad walls whispering secrets of bygone eras. Upon his arrival, he was greeted by the housekeeper, Mrs. Agatha Miller, a stout woman with a no-nonsense demeanour and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome. Lady Whitcomb is most grateful you could come," she announced, leading him through the ornate hallways adorned with exquisite tapestries and antique furnishings. In the drawing room, Lady Beatrice awaited him. She was a petite woman of graceful bearing, her silver hair neatly coiffed, and her attire impeccably stylish. Despite her composed exterior, Poirot detected a subtle tension in her posture. "Thank you for coming, Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice tinged with anxiety. "I am at my wit's end. Last evening, during our annual soirée, a most precious item disappeared from my private gallery, the silent portrait, a family heirloom of immense value, both sentimentally and monetarily." Poirot nodded thoughtfully, his keen eyes surveying the room and its occupants. The guests present included Lord Henry Langley, a robust man with a commanding presence, known for his ventures in the shipping industry and his competitive nature. Miss Eleanor Fairfax, a young and ambitious art dealer whose recent disagreements with Lady Whitcomb over the authenticity of certain acquisitions had caused ripples in their professional relationship. Dr. Samuel Harding, the Whitcomb family physician whose reserved nature and recent peculiar behaviour had not gone unnoticed. Mrs. Agatha Miller, the loyal housekeeper whose unwavering dedication to Lady Whitcomb was unquestionable, yet something in her demeanour suggested hidden depths. Mr. Victor Blackwood, a mysterious guest with a shadowy past, his connection to the Whitcomb family unclear, adding an air of suspicion to his presence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lady Whitcomb continued, "the portrait was secured in the gallery, which was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry, yet the painting is gone. I have no idea who could have committed such a deed." Poirot's eyes twinkled with interest. "Madame, may I inspect the gallery where the portrait was kept?" "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. Please follow me." Lady Whitcomb replied, guiding him to the grand gallery. The room was a masterpiece in itself, with high ceilings and walls adorned with an impressive collection of art. At the centre stood the silent portrait, now conspicuously absent, leaving only its ornate frame empty. As Poirot examined the gallery, his meticulous nature came to the fore. He noticed the window latch was slightly ajar, suggesting an entry point, yet the lock showed no signs of tampering. Behind a large bookshelf, he discovered a narrow passageway, cleverly concealed and rarely used. Additionally, the security alarm system had been recently updated, indicating someone with technical knowledge might be involved. On a nearby desk lay an unsigned threatening note, the ink fresh and the message cryptic. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot addressed the assembly. There are several elements here that merit closer examination. Each of you had access to the gallery, and each harbours secrets that may prove pertinent. Lord Langley cleared his throat, his robust voice cutting through the tension. Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, I have no reason to steal such a valuable piece. My rivalry with Lady Whitcomb has always been strictly professional. Miss Fairfax, her youthful face flushed with frustration, interjected, I've always respected Lady Whitcomb's collection, but our disagreement last week over the authenticity of a recent acquisition was quite heated. Perhaps that played a part. Dr. Harding shifted uncomfortably, avoiding direct eye contact. I have been under considerable stress lately, but I can assure you it has nothing to do with this theft. Mrs. Miller offered a polite smile, though her eyes darted nervously around the room. I have served Lady Whitcomb faithfully for years. I cannot fathom why anyone would want to steal from her. Mr. Blackwood remained silent, his expression inscrutable, adding an additional layer of mystery to the already perplexing situation. Poirot leaned forward, his moustache twitching slightly in contemplation. Each of you has your reasons and opportunities. It is my duty to uncover the truth, hidden beneath layers of deception and subtle motives. The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of Poirot's words settling upon the guests. Lady Whitcomb looked to him with hopeful eyes. Please, Monsieur Poirot, I am entrusting you with this matter. I have faith in your abilities. Poirot inclined his head gracefully. Madame, we shall proceed with the utmost care and discretion. Let us begin by thoroughly examining the evidence and understanding the intricate relationships at play. As the evening progressed, Poirot engaged each guest in conversation, his sharp observations and gentle probing gradually unveiling the complexities beneath their facades. Subtle clues were scattered throughout their interactions, nervous glances, slight hesitations, and unguarded remarks, all pieces of the intricate puzzle awaiting his deft hands. The manor, with its labyrinthine corridors and hidden passageways, seemed to hold its breath, every shadow and whisper adding to the suspense that enveloped the household. Poirot, ever the master of deduction, felt the familiar thrill of the hunt, confident that the truth lay just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 2. The Gathering of Suspects. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Whitcomb Manor's grand drawing room, casting intricate patterns upon the polished oak floor. Hercule Poirot, ever the connoisseur of order, admired the symmetry of the room, noting each meticulously placed piece of furniture and artwork. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the guests assembled in an uneasy harmony, each aware of the missing silent portrait, yet unaware of the intricate web Poirot was beginning to weave. Lady Beatrice Whitcomb stood by the fireplace, her posture impeccable, despite the evident strain in her eyes. She glanced at Poirot with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Monsieur Poirot, I trust you are settling in well? Poirot inclined his head gracefully. Madame, your home is a masterpiece of elegance. It is only fitting that such a fine establishment now seeks the resolution of a delicate mystery." The guests, having taken their places around the room, exchanged subtle glances. Lord Henry Langley, a tall man with a commanding presence, stood near the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Miss Eleanor Fairfax, a young woman with sharp eyes and an air of determination, sat by the side table, her fingers nervously tapping against her teacup. Dr. Samuel Harding, the family physician, appeared preoccupied, his gaze distant as he stared into his tea. Mrs. Agatha Miller, the housekeeper, maintained a composed exterior, though her eyes darted occasionally towards Poirot. Lastly, Mr. Victor Blackwood, a man of enigmatic demeanour, remained silent, his expression inscrutable as he observed the room from a shadowed corner. Poirot addressed the assembly, his voice calm and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my intention to understand not only the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of the silent portrait, but also the relationships and interactions among you. Each of you holds a piece of the puzzle." He turned his attention to Lord Langley first. "Lord Langley, your reputation in the shipping industry precedes you. I understand there has been a rivalry between you and Lady Whitcomb regarding recent business ventures." Lord Langley cleared his throat, his robust voice steady. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, our differences are purely professional. I assure you I have no interest in petty theft." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Yet, financial strain often breeds desperation. How has your current venture fared?" Lord Langley's jaw tightened momentarily before he responded. "Profitably, thank you. My ships are setting sail once more, and I foresee a prosperous year ahead." Satisfied but not entirely convinced, Poirot moved on to Miss Fairfax. "Miss Fairfax, your role as an art dealer places you in frequent collaboration and occasionally contention with Lady Whitcomb. Could you elaborate on your recent disagreements?" Miss Fairfax's eyes flickered with a mix of frustration and defensiveness. "Our disagreement was purely academic, concerning the authenticity of a recent acquisition. I respect Lady Whitcomb's judgment, but I stand by my expertise." Poirot's gaze was unwavering. "Artistic integrity is paramount, yet disputes over authenticity can sometimes mask deeper issues. Have there been any personal grievances between you and Lady Whitcomb?" Miss Fairfax hesitated, then shook her head. "None that I am aware of, Monsieur Poirot. My focus remains on my work." Next, Poirot addressed Dr. Harding. "Dr. Harding, as the family physician, you are privy to the personal affairs of this household. Have you observed any unusual behaviour among the guests or Lady Whitcomb herself?" Dr. Harding adjusted his spectacles, his demeanour reserved. "Madame Whitcomb is under considerable stress, I can attest. The recent updates to the Manor's security system have been a source of anxiety for her." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And what of the guests? Any signs of distress or concealment?" The doctor pondered for a moment before replying. Dr. Harding nodded thoughtfully. "Well, some guests have been more nervous than others, but I cannot say for certain why." Poirot turned his attention to Mrs. Miller. "Mrs. Miller, your loyalty to Lady Whitcomb is well known, yet loyalty can sometimes stem from motives less apparent. Have you noticed anything amiss in the household recently?" Mrs. Miller offered a polite smile, though her eyes betrayed a hint of unease. "I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, everything is as it should be. Lady Whitcomb trusts me implicitly, and I take my duties very seriously." Poirot studied her closely, noting the slight tremor in her hand as she set down her teacup. "Trust is indeed a delicate matter, yet in every household, secrets lie beneath the surface. Are there any matters you believe I should be aware of?" Mrs. Miller shook her head gracefully. "Nothing that would concern you, sir." Finally, Poirot addressed the silent Mr. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, your presence here is somewhat enigmatic. Could you share your connection to the Whitcomb family? Mr. Blackwood met Poirot's gaze, his expression unreadable. I am a distant relative, Monsieur Poirot. Recently, I sought to reconnect with my family, and Lady Whitcomb kindly welcomed me into her home. Poirot nodded slowly. Family ties can be both a source of strength and contention. Have you experienced any disagreements or tensions since your arrival? Mr. Blackwood's lips remained sealed, his eyes fixed on a distant point beyond the room. Poirot made a mental note of the man's reticence, sensing that his silence was more telling than his words. The room settled into a heavy silence as Poirot pondered the gathered information. His keen mind began to sift through the subtle cues and underlying tensions, each guest presenting a facade that concealed their true intentions. The broken window latch, the hidden passageway, the changed security code, and the threatening note, all pieces of a puzzle that required meticulous assembly. Poirot stood gracefully, his moustache twitching slightly, as he prepared to delve deeper into the mystery. Thank you for your cooperation thus far. I will continue my inquiries, both formal and informal, to uncover the truth. In the meantime, I encourage you all to remain composed and cooperative. As the guests dispersed to their respective quarters, Poirot lingered, his eyes never leaving Mrs. Miller and Mr. Blackwood. Their interactions had been the most evasive, their motives the most obscured. He sensed that beneath their polite exteriors lay secrets waiting to be unveiled. Leaving the drawing room, Poirot made his way to the library, a sanctuary of knowledge and contemplation. He sat at his desk, the threatening notes spread before him, its cryptic message a challenge to his intellect. The ink was of a unique type, one that Poirot recognized as being used by only a select few. His mind raced through possibilities, each guest a potential suspect with their own motives and opportunities. As the afternoon sun began to wane, casting long shadows across the manor, Poirot's thoughts remained steadfast. The silent portrait was not merely a missing artwork, it was a key to unlocking the intricate dynamics of Whitcomb Manor. With each passing moment, the mystery deepened, and Poirot was determined to unravel it, one thread at a time. The manor's elegant facade belied the turmoil within, and as night approached, the true nature of the suspects began to emerge. Poirot, ever the master of deduction, felt the thrill of the chase igniting his senses. The game was afoot, and he was poised to bring the truth to light, hidden beneath layers of deception and subtle motives. Chapter 3. Clues and Red Herrings. The morning sun cast its first golden rays upon Whitcomb Manor, illuminating the grand facade with a serene brilliance. Inside, Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing-room, his immaculate moustache impeccably groomed, as he meticulously reviewed the notes from the previous evening's inquiries. The air was thick with anticipation, each guest acutely aware of Poirot's presence and the scrutiny it implied. Lady Beatrice Whitcomb, ever the epitome of grace, moved gracefully to offer refreshments. "Monsieur Poirot, please take your time. Perhaps a cup of tea would be agreeable." "Merci, Lady Whitcomb," Poirot replied with his characteristic charm, accepting the delicate porcelain cup. "A good cup of tea is always welcome." As the guests mingled, Poirot's keen eyes continued their silent observation. Lord Henry Langley, with his robust frame and authoritative demeanour, stood by the window gazing pensively at the meticulously trimmed gardens. His rivalry with Lady Whitcomb was well known, yet Poirot sensed a layer of respect beneath the professional veneer. Miss Eleanor Fairfax, the young art dealer, lingered near the fireplace, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of her glass. Her recent dispute with Lady Whitcomb over the portrait's authenticity had left tensions high. However, Poirot noted the subtle tremor in her hands, not necessarily of guilt, but perhaps of the pressure she felt in maintaining her reputation. Dr. Samuel Harding, the family physician, sat slightly apart from the group, his posture rigid and his eyes darting around the room with unease. His nervousness was palpable. Yet, Poirot wondered if it stemmed from personal troubles rather than any involvement in the theft. Mrs. Agatha Miller, the loyal housekeeper, moved with practiced efficiency, her eyes occasionally meeting Poirot's before swiftly diverting. Her furtive glances suggested secrets she was keen to keep hidden, though her unwavering loyalty to Lady Whitcomb remained evident. Lastly, Mr. Victor Blackwood, the enigmatic guest, remained largely silent, his presence adding an air of mystery to the already charged atmosphere. His connection to the Whitcomb family was unclear, and Poirot sensed that beneath his reserved exterior lay layers yet to be uncovered. As Poirot sipped his tea, he allowed his mind to sift through the evening's events, searching for patterns and inconsistencies. He recalled the broken window latch in the gallery, the hidden passageway behind the bookshelf, the recently changed security code, and the threatening note. Each clue was a piece of the puzzle, yet their true significance was yet to be determined. "Madame Whitcomb," Poirot began, addressing the assembled guests, "there are several elements here that merit closer examination. Let us consider each clue in turn." He placed the empty frame of the silent portrait on the table, its absence a stark reminder of the mystery at hand. Firstly, the broken window latch suggests an entry point, but without signs of forced entry. It indicates a more subtle approach. Perhaps someone with access to the manor could have manipulated it. Lord Langley interjected, his voice steady yet guarded. "Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, my dealings are strictly professional. I have no need to interfere with your esteemed friend's art collection." Poirot nodded thoughtfully before turning to Miss Fairfax. "Miss Fairfax, your recent disagreement with Lady Whitcomb over the authenticity of an acquisition is noteworthy. However, does this provide you with a motive to steal a portrait that is both a family heirloom and a significant financial asset?" Miss Fairfax met his gaze, her eyes revealing a flicker of frustration. "While our professional relationship has had its strains, I would never stoop to theft. My reputation is built on integrity." Poirot acknowledged her response with a slight nod before addressing Dr. Harding. "Dr. Harding, your nervous demeanor is quite apparent. Is there something troubling you that you wish to share?" The doctor hesitated, then sighed. "I've been dealing with some personal matters, but they are unrelated to this incident. My duty is to the Whitcomb family's health, not their possessions." Turning his attention to Mrs. Miller, Poirot observed her composed exterior. "Mrs. Miller, your dedication to Lady Whitcomb is unquestionable. However, your furtive glances suggest there may be more to your story." She offered a polite smile, though her eyes betrayed a hint of anxiety. "I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, my only concern is the well-being of Lady Whitcomb and the smooth running of this household." Finally, Poirot regarded Mr. Blackwood. "And you, Mr. Blackwood, your presence here is intriguing. Can you elaborate on your connection to the Whitcomb family?" Mr. Blackwood remained silent, his expression inscrutable. Poirot noted this as a point of interest, sensing that Mr. Blackwood's quietude might conceal significant information. "As we piece together these clues," Poirot continued, "we must also consider red herrings, elements that may mislead us from the true path. For instance, the broken window latch might suggest an outsider's involvement, yet it could be a deliberate distraction." He gestured towards the hidden passageway behind the bookshelf. This concealed route indicates familiarity with the manor's architecture, pointing towards someone within the household. Additionally, the changed security code implies technical knowledge, possibly held by someone employed here or a frequent visitor. Poirot's sharp mind connected the dots, yet the picture remained incomplete. The threatening note, though unsigned, adds another layer of complexity. It suggests premeditation and an attempt to intimidate rather than a spontaneous act of theft. He looked around the room, his gaze settling on each guest in turn. Each of you holds a piece of this intricate puzzle. It is through careful observation and understanding of human nature that we shall uncover the truth. The room fell into a contemplative silence, each guest lost in their own thoughts. Poirot leaned back, his expression serene yet focused. Let us proceed with our inquiries, examining each clue meticulously and considering all possibilities. The truth, as always, lies hidden beneath the surface, awaiting discovery. As the day progressed, Poirot's methodical approach began to unravel the layers of deception. He revisited the crime scene, scrutinizing the broken latch and the hidden passageway once more, noting the subtle signs of tampering. The changed security code hinted at someone with technical expertise, possibly linked to the manor's recent renovations. Poirot also examined the threatening note more closely, identifying the unique type of ink used, an ink only available in the manor's study, suggesting access by someone with privileged entry. This detail subtly shifted the focus towards those with direct access to the household's inner workings. Throughout his investigations, Poirot remained ever vigilant, aware that red herrings could easily obscure the path to the truth. He considered Lord Langley's alibi, Miss Fairfax's professional frustrations, Dr. Harding's personal struggles, Mrs. Miller's secretive behavior, and Mr. Blackwood's mysterious ties. In the end, it was Poirot's unparalleled ability to discern subtle truths from misleading clues that kept him on the right path. As evening descended upon Whitcomb Manor, the shadows lengthening and the manor settling into a hushed stillness, Poirot felt the mystery deepen, confident that each revelation brought him closer to unveiling the silent portrait's fate. Chapter 4. Unveiling Secret. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Whitcomb Manor, casting intricate patterns upon the polished parquet floor. Hercule Poirot sat in a quiet corner of the drawing-room, his neatly trimmed moustache twitching thoughtfully as he reviewed his notes. The events of the previous evening replayed in his mind, each detail meticulously catalogued. Lady Beatrice Whitcomb, ever the gracious hostess, had already retreated to her private study, leaving Poirot to his contemplations. The guests, now slightly more relaxed after the initial tension, mingled discreetly, their conversations hushed and wary. It was time for Poirot to delve deeper, to uncover the truths hidden beneath polite facades. He approached Lord Henry Langley first, finding him by the expansive window overlooking the manicured gardens. The robust industrialist was gazing pensively at the autumn leaves, his expression a mixture of concern and contemplation. "Lord Langley," Poirot began softly, "may I have a word?" Langley turned, offering a courteous nod. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. How may I assist you?" Poirot motioned for him to sit. "I understand you have recently encountered financial difficulties. Could you elaborate on this matter?" Lord Langley sighed, rubbing his temples. Indeed, a recent venture in the shipping industry did not fare as expected. Losses were substantial, but I assure you my financial woes are separate from any dealings with Lady Whitcomb. Poirot observed him keenly. "Yet your rivalry with Lady Whitcomb over business ventures is well known. While mutual respect exists, could such professional tensions harbour any personal grievances?" Langley shook his head. Our relationship is strictly professional. I respect Lady Whitcomb immensely and would never jeopardize her trust or our standing." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Lord Langley. Your candor is appreciated." As Langley departed, Poirot turned his attention to Miss Eleanor Fairfax, who was meticulously arranging her portfolio by the fireplace. Her hands moved with a practiced grace, but Poirot detected a slight tremor betraying her composed exterior. "Miss Fairfax," he greeted warmly, "may I speak with you privately?" Eleanor looked up, her eyes meeting his with a flicker of anxiety. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot gestured to a nearby chair. "I understand you have recently fabricated certain credentials to secure your position in the art world. Could you explain the nature of these fabrications?" Eleanor's cheeks flushed a delicate pink. "Yes, it's true that I embellished my background to advance my career. The art market is fiercely competitive, and I feared my genuine qualifications were insufficient." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes twinkling with understanding. "A desperate measure indeed. However, does this desperation extend to the realm of theft? Is there any conceivable motive for you to steal the silent portrait?" Eleanor shook her head vehemently. "Absolutely not. My aspirations are built on integrity despite my shortcomings. Stealing such a valuable piece would destroy any remaining respect I have." Satisfied for the moment, Poirot thanked her and moved on, his mind noting the desperation beneath her ambition, but finding no immediate connection to the theft. Next, Poirot approached Dr. Samuel Harding, who was seated near the window, his posture rigid and his face pale. The family physician appeared burdened, his usual composure marred by visible signs of distress. "Dr. Harding," Poirot greeted gently, "may I inquire about your recent state of health?" The doctor looked up, his eyes weary. "I've been battling a medical condition that has caused considerable anxiety and fatigue. It has been a trying time, but I assure you it has no bearing on the events at Whitcomb Manor." Poirot nodded sympathetically. "I understand, Doctor. Your dedication to the Whitcomb family is commendable, and I hope for your swift recovery." With Dr. Harding seemingly cleared of suspicion, Poirot turned his attention to Mrs. Agatha Miller, the steadfast housekeeper. She was arranging fresh flowers in a vase, her movements precise and efficient. "Mrs. Miller," Poirot began respectfully, "may I have a moment of your time?" Agatha looked up, her expression composed yet cautious. "Certainly, Monsieur Poirot. How may I assist you?" Poirot observed her closely. "Your loyalty to Lady Whitcomb is unquestionable, but I have reason to believe you have been communicating secretly with an unknown party. Could you shed light on this matter?" Mrs. Miller's eyes flickered momentarily before she regained her composure. "I assure you my communications are purely professional, related to the maintenance and management of the household. There is nothing untoward." Poirot raised an eyebrow, sensing an undercurrent of something unspoken. "Might there be a reason for such secrecy? Perhaps someone you need to protect or a matter of confidentiality?" Agatha hesitated, her hands clasped tightly. "My role requires discretion, but I cannot disclose more than that. My sole concern is the well-being of Lady Whitcomb and the smooth running of this estate." Poirot nodded, respecting her boundaries, but noting the hidden depths behind her guarded demeanour. Finally, Poirot addressed Mr. Victor Blackwood, who had remained an enigma since his arrival. He found Blackwood in the library, surrounded by volumes of literature, yet his attention seemed elsewhere. "Mr. Blackwood," Poirot greeted, "may I speak with you privately?" Blackwood looked up, his expression inscrutable. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot settled into a chair opposite him. "Your presence here is quite intriguing. Could you elucidate your connection to the Whitcomb family? Victor took a deep breath. I am a distant relative, seeking acceptance into the family. My claim is legitimate, pertaining to certain family assets that I believe are rightfully mine. Poirot listened intently. And what is the nature of your relationship with Lady Whitcomb? Is there any discord or tension that might suggest a motive for theft? Victor shook his head slowly. No, my relationship with Lady Whitcomb is cordial. I respect her position and her stewardship of the family legacy. My intentions are purely to integrate and contribute positively. Poirot considered his words carefully. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Your honesty is noted. As Poirot concluded his interviews, he retreated to his study, his mind abuzz with the revelations. Lord Langley's financial struggles, while significant, did not directly link him to the theft. Miss Fairfax's fabricated credentials revealed desperation, yet her integrity remained intact. Dr. Harding's medical condition provided a plausible explanation for his anxiety, absolving him of suspicion. Mrs. Miller's secret communications hinted at hidden agendas, perhaps a piece of the puzzle yet to be fully understood. And Mr. Blackwood's legitimate claim to family assets added another layer of complexity, raising questions about his true intentions. Poirot leaned back in his chair, contemplating the intricate web of relationships and motives. Each revelation had peeled back a layer, yet the core of the mystery remained elusive. The silent portrait's disappearance was no simple act of theft. It was entwined with the very fabric of Whitcomb Manor and its inhabitants. As evening approached, Poirot prepared to reconvene with the guests, armed with the knowledge gleaned from his interviews. The manor's grand dining room awaited, its long table set with immaculate precision, reflecting the underlying tensions that now simmered beneath the surface. Lady Whitcomb entered, her demeanour composed, but her eyes betraying a hint of anxiety. Monsieur Poirot, have you made any progress? Poirot stood, offering a reassuring smile. Madame, we are gradually uncovering the layers of this intricate mystery. Each of your guests holds a piece of the truth, and with careful consideration, the full picture will soon emerge. As the guests gathered once more, Poirot felt the threads of the mystery intertwine, each revelation bringing him closer to unveiling the silent portrait's fate. The manor, with its hidden passageways and concealed secrets, seemed to whisper its own tale, waiting for Poirot's discerning mind to unravel its mysteries. Chapter 5. The puzzle deepens. The afternoon sun bathed Whitcomb Manor in a warm, golden light, streaming through the tall windows and casting intricate patterns upon the drawing-room's elegant furnishings. Hercule Poirot sat in his favourite armchair, his keen eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement among the guests. The manor, with its stately decor and expansive halls, seemed to hold its breath, the mystery of the missing silent portrait weighing heavily upon its walls. After a morning of thorough interviews and meticulous note-taking, Poirot decided it was time to revisit the crime scene. Accompanied by Mrs. Agatha Miller, the ever-diligent housekeeper, he made his way to the grand gallery where the portrait had vanished. The room, once vibrant with the hues of the silent portrait, now felt hollow and silent, the empty frame a stark reminder of the theft. Poirot moved gracefully around the room, his eyes not missing a single detail. "Look closely, madame," he instructed Mrs. Miller, his voice calm yet authoritative. "Every clue, no matter how small, may lead us to the truth." He approached the empty frame, his fingers gently tracing the edges of the now lifeless border. "Notice here," Poirot pointed out, "the frame is slightly loosened. This suggests that the portrait was removed with great care, rather than through force. The perpetrator likely had both the intention and the knowledge to handle such a valuable piece delicately." Mrs. Miller nodded, her expression thoughtful. Yes, Monsieur Poirot, only someone familiar with the gallery would know how to do this without leaving obvious signs of entry. Poirot's attention then shifted to the subtle scent lingering in the air. Do you smell that, madam? A faint trace of a rare cologne. It is distinct and uncommon, not one typically found in our household. He closed his eyes briefly, inhaling deeply. Yes, it matches the fragrance worn by Mr. Victor Blackwood. However, we must be cautious. Scents can be transferred inadvertently, and appearances can often be deceiving. Mrs. Miller glanced towards the side of the room where a narrow passageway lay hidden behind a heavy bookshelf. And what of the footprints leading to the passage, Monsieur Poirot? Poirot followed her gaze, noting the distinct impressions in the polished wooden floor. Ah, yes, these footprints correspond to the shoes worn by Mrs. Agatha Miller. Yet let us not jump to conclusions. Footprints can be misleading, especially in a house as large as this, with numerous paths and corridors. He bent down to inspect the marks more closely, his fingers lightly pressing against the wood. Notice the pattern here, madame. These are not simply footprints, but the subtle indentations of high-quality leather shoes. They match Mrs. Miller's footwear perfectly. Mrs. Miller felt a flicker of unease, but maintained her composure. I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I have nothing to hide. My sole concern is the well-being of Lady Whitcomb and the smooth running of this household. Poirot stood, his moustache twitching slightly as he considered the gathered clues. Indeed, madame. However, we must explore all possibilities. The broken window latch suggests an entry point, but without signs of forced entry, it points to someone with access to the manor. The hidden passageway further narrows our focus to those intimately familiar with the house's layout. He paced slowly, his mind weaving the threads of evidence into a coherent tapestry. The rare cologne, the careful removal of the portrait, and the footprints all point towards specific individuals. Yet we must remain vigilant, for each clue could be a deliberate misdirection. Poirot paused, his gaze settling on Lord Henry Langley, who stood by the window, deep in thought. Lord Langley, your financial difficulties are well documented. Could desperation drive you to such an act? Langley shook his head firmly. No, Monsieur Poirot, my losses have been substantial, but I have no motive to steal from Lady Whitcomb. Our rivalry has always been strictly professional. Poirot turned his attention to Miss Eleanor Fairfax, who was nervously adjusting her gloves by the fireplace. Miss Fairfax, your recent disputes over the authenticity of art pieces have caused quite a stir, yet would that drive you to theft? Eleanor met his gaze, her eyes betraying a mixture of frustration and determination. I admire Lady Whitcomb's collection. Despite our disagreements, stealing from her would ruin my career, not advance it. Poirot nodded thoughtfully before addressing Dr. Samuel Harding. Dr. Harding, your anxiety is noticeable, but does it relate to this incident? The doctor sighed, running a hand through his hair. My stress stems from personal matters, unrelated to the theft. My duty is to the health of the Whitcomb family, not their possessions. Finally, Poirot regarded Mr. Victor Blackwood, whose enigmatic presence had remained largely unchanged. Mr. Blackwood, your claim to family assets is intriguing. Could this be a motive for your involvement? Blackwood remained silent, his expression inscrutable. Poirot noted this, sensing that beneath his reserved exterior lay untold depths. Returning to the center of the gallery, Poirot contemplated the gathered clues. We have the loosened frame, the rare cologne, and the footprints. Each suggests involvement by someone within the household or a trusted guest. However, we must consider the possibility of red herrings designed to mislead us. He looked around the room, his eyes meeting each guest's in turn. The broken window latch might suggest an outsider's involvement, but combined with the hidden passageway, it points inward. The rare cologne directs suspicion towards Mr. Blackwood, yet footprints align with Mrs. Miller's shoes. It is a delicate balance of possibilities. Poirot smiled gently, his confidence unwavering. The key lies in understanding how these clues interconnect. A meticulous examination and a keen eye will reveal the truth hidden beneath layers of deception. He turned to Lady Whitcomb, who stood nearby, her expression hopeful, yet anxious. "Madame, we are making progress, but patience is essential. Let us continue our investigation with diligence and care." Lady Whitcomb nodded, her eyes filled with trust. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. I am grateful for your guidance." As Poirot left the gallery, his mind raced with the intricate web of evidence. Each clue was a thread, leading him closer to the heart of the mystery. The silent portrait's disappearance was no simple theft. It was entwined with the very essence of Whitcomb Manor and its inhabitants. Back in the drawing room, Poirot gathered his thoughts, knowing that the puzzle was far from complete. The manor's opulent halls and hidden passages held secrets waiting to be uncovered, and with each passing moment, the truth edged closer to revelation. The shadows lengthened as evening approached, and the manor seemed to grow quieter, the anticipation of the night heightening the suspense. Poirot, ever the master of deduction, felt the pieces beginning to align, confident that the puzzle would soon yield its hidden picture. Chapter 6. Tensions rise. The late afternoon sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the meticulously arranged drawing room of Whitcomb Manor. Hercule Poirot sat in his favoured armchair, his keen eyes observing the guests who had become increasingly restless as the day wore on. The grand estate, with its high ceilings and ornate decor, seemed to amplify the mounting tension that now permeated the air. Lady Beatrice Whitcomb, ever the dignified hostess, moved gracefully among the guests, her composure betraying none of the anxiety that surely lay beneath her serene exterior. Hercule Poirot watched her carefully, noting the subtle signs of distress in her measured movements and the occasional flicker of worry in her eyes. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere in the manor grew more charged. Accusations, though never voiced directly, hung heavy in the air. Lord Henry Langley's robust frame often stood near the windows, casting sidelong glances at the other guests, while Miss Eleanor Fairfax fidgeted with her gloves, her ambitions seemingly clashing with her evident unease. Dr. Samuel Harding remained distant, his usual reserve now tinged with visible strain, and Mrs. Agatha Miller's discreet glances suggested secrets she was desperate to conceal. Mr. Victor Blackwood, ever the enigma, maintained his inscrutable silence, adding to the pervasive sense of suspicion. Poirot knew that the key to unravelling the mystery lay not only in the clues themselves, but in the subtle interplay of human behaviour and emotion. He had already identified several red herrings, but the true culprit was still hidden beneath layers of deception. A sudden clap of thunder heralded an unexpected power outage, plunging the manor into darkness. Gas lamps flickered to life, casting eerie shadows that danced across the room. The guests murmured anxiously, some coughing as the sudden change disoriented them. Lady Whitcomb, visibly distressed, clapped her hands to regain attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice steady despite the turmoil, "please remain calm. We will have the lights back shortly." Poirot remained calm, his mind already working through the implications of this interruption. In the dim light, he noted that one particular lamp in the gallery had remained inexplicably lit. This was a detail he had overlooked in the earlier chaos. As the power was restored, The room settled back into its previous state, but Poirot's observation did not escape him. He knew that every detail, no matter how small, could be a crucial piece of the puzzle. "Madame Whitcomb," Poirot began, addressing the assembled guests with his usual composed authority, "there is a detail that warrants our attention. During the power outage, I noticed that a specific lamp in the gallery remained lit. This is unusual, as all other lamps were extinguished during the blackout." Lady Whitcomb nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed, I did notice that lamp stayed on. It is an old chandelier, seldom used these days. It seems peculiar." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes twinkling with the thrill of discovery. "Precisely, madam. This suggests that someone had a reason to keep that lamp burning, perhaps to draw attention away from their actions, or to conceal something in the gallery." Lord Langley, who had been listening intently, cleared his throat. "Monsieur Poirot, are you implying that the blackout was orchestrated to facilitate the theft?" Poirot smiled subtly. "Not necessarily orchestrated, but certainly exploited. A power outage would create confusion and allow movements that would otherwise be noticed. The fact that the chandelier remained lit indicates a deliberate choice, possibly to illuminate a specific area or to create a diversion." Miss Fairfax, her anxiety now more pronounced, interjected, "But why would someone need to keep that particular lamp on? The gallery is well lit even without the chandelier." Poirot's eyes gleamed with understanding. "That is the question, Miss Fairfax. It suggests that the lighting served a particular purpose beyond mere illumination. Perhaps it was to highlight the absence of the silent portrait or to obscure something else within the room." Dr. Harding, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. Could it be that someone was hiding something in the gallery, even after the portrait was taken? Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "That is a distinct possibility, Doctor. It leads us to consider that the act was not merely theft, but part of a larger scheme to deceive and mislead." Mrs. Miller, the housekeeper, offered a polite smile, though her eyes darted nervously around the room. "Monsieur Poirot, if there is anything I can do to assist further, please do not hesitate to ask." Poirot acknowledged her with a gracious nod. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Your cooperation is most valuable." Mr. Blackwood, whose presence had remained largely passive, now spoke up, his voice calm yet tinged with curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot, your observations are most intriguing. However, without concrete evidence, such theories remain speculative." Poirot smiled gently. "Indeed, Mr. Blackwood, speculation is merely the first step towards uncovering the truth. It is through careful observation and logical deduction that we shall proceed." As the guests returned to their conversations, Poirot stood and moved to the window, his silhouette framed by the fading light of dusk. He reflected on the new clue, the lamp in the gallery, and how it fit into the intricate web of evidence. The broken window latch, the hidden passageway, the changed security code, the threatening note, and now the selective lighting, all these elements pointed towards a meticulously planned act of deception. He knew that the tension among the guests was reaching its peak, each individual feeling the weight of suspicion and the pressure of Poirot's relentless scrutiny. Alliances had shifted subtly, trust had waned, and the once polite conversations were now underscored with unspoken accusations. Poirot returned to his seat, his mind racing through the possibilities. The power outage had provided an opportunity for the perpetrator to manipulate the scene, but it had also introduced a new clue that could help unravel the mystery. He needed to consider how each guest might have utilized the blackout to their advantage, how the lighting in the gallery could reveal hidden motives, and what secrets were concealed within the manor's opulent walls. "Madame Whitcomb," Poirot began once more, addressing the group with renewed focus, The pieces of this puzzle are slowly coming together. Each clue, each interaction brings us closer to the truth. However, we must remain vigilant and discerning, for the truth is often veiled beneath layers of deception. Lady Whitcomb regarded him with a mixture of hope and concern. Monsieur Poirot, your insights are invaluable. We are all eager to see this matter resolved. Poirot inclined his head gracefully. Rest assured, madame, we are making progress. The silent portrait's disappearance is intertwined with the very essence of Whitcomb Manor and its inhabitants. It is through understanding the intricate relationships and the subtle motivations that we shall uncover the truth. As the evening drew to a close, the guests lingered in the drawing room, their interactions now more fraught with tension and suspicion. Poirot, ever the master of deduction, felt the mystery deepen, each revelation and red herring drawing him closer to the heart of the enigma that was the silent portrait. The manor, with its grand halls and hidden passageways, seemed to pulse with secrets waiting to be unveiled. And as the shadows lengthened and the night settled in, Poirot remained ever vigilant, confident that the pieces of the puzzle were steadily falling into place, ready to reveal the true nature of the crime that had so unsettled Whitcomb Manor. Chapter 7. The Gathering Storm. The grand dining hall of Whitcomb Manor was resplendent in its evening finery, the long mahogany table set meticulously with fine china and gleaming silverware. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, inviting glow over the assembled guests, their faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the table, his neatly groomed moustache twitching slightly as he prepared to address the room. Lady Beatrice Whitcomb, elegant in a deep emerald gown, sat beside Poirot, her expression a blend of anxiety and hope. The other guests occupied their places with varying degrees of tension. Lord Henry Langley's robust frame leaned slightly forward, Miss Eleanor Fairfax's hands nervously clasped in her lap, Dr. Samuel Harding's pale complexion betraying his unease, Mrs. Agatha Miller's stern demeanour unwavering, and Mr. Victor Blackwood's inscrutable gaze fixed on the centre of the table. Poirot cleared his throat, the room falling silent in anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm and authoritative, "we have gathered here to piece together the unfortunate disappearance of the silent portrait. Through careful observation and deductive reasoning, we have uncovered several key clues that warrant our attention." He gestured gracefully towards the table, where the empty frame of the silent portrait stood as a stark reminder of the mystery at hand. Firstly, the broken window latch in the gallery suggests an entry point. However, the absence of forced entry indicates that the perpetrator had knowledge of the manor's architecture. Lord Langley interjected, his voice steady yet edged with frustration. "Monsieur Poirot, while I understand the technicalities, my financial struggles are well documented. Yet I assure you I have no interest in stealing from Lady Whitcomb." Poirot inclined his head thoughtfully. "Indeed, Lord Langley, your rivalry has always been professional. However, we must consider that desperation can cloud judgment and loyalty." Miss Fairfax, her youthful face flushed with a mixture of frustration and determination, spoke up. "Monsieur Poirot, my disagreements with Lady Whitcomb over art authenticity were purely professional. I have no desire to tarnish my reputation by engaging in theft." Poirot smiled gently, acknowledging her integrity. "Your candor is commendable, Miss Fairfax. Yet ambition can sometimes lead one down unexpected paths." Turning his attention to Dr. Harding, Poirot continued, "Dr. Harding, your nervousness is evident. While you attribute it to personal matters, might there be another source of anxiety related to the events here?" The doctor hesitated, his eyes darting briefly before he regained his composure. "But my concerns are solely of a personal nature, unrelated to the theft." Poirot nodded, moving gracefully to Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller, your loyalty to Lady Whitcomb is unquestionable. However, recent secret communications suggest otherwise. Can you elucidate the nature of these correspondences? Mrs. Miller maintained her stern facade, though her eyes flickered momentarily with unease. My communications are strictly professional, pertaining to the management of the household. There is nothing untoward to disclose. Poirot's gaze softened slightly. Of course, discretion is paramount in your role, yet secrecy often hides deeper truths. Finally, Poirot addressed Mr. Blackwood, whose enigmatic presence had long intrigued him. Mr. Blackwood, your claim to family assets introduces a new dimension to our investigation. How do you reconcile your aspirations with your respect for Lady Whitcomb? Blackwood remained silent, his expression unreadable. Poirot noted the subtle tension in his posture, sensing that beneath his calm exterior lay unspoken motives. Poirot took a deep breath, his mind weaving the threads of evidence together. Furthermore, the threatening note found in Lady Whitcomb's study contains a unique type of ink, one that is not commonly available. This suggests that the author had privileged access to the manor's resources. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Such a detail points directly towards someone within the household, someone who has intimate knowledge of the manor's amenities. A hush fell over the room as Poirot's implications sank in. Lady Whitcomb looked to him with a mixture of fear and hope. Monsieur Poirot, are you implying that one of us is responsible for this heinous act? Poirot regarded her with compassionate understanding. Madame, we must consider all our possibilities without prejudice. The truth lies within our collective scrutiny and the unravelling of deceit. Miss Fairfax leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. Monsieur Poirot, if you suspect someone here, you must have substantial evidence. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Indeed, Miss Fairfax, the clues are interconnected, each leading us closer to unveiling the truth. The broken latch, the hidden passageway, the rare cologne scent, and now the unique ink. All these elements form a tapestry that, when examined closely, reveals the perpetrator's identity. Lord Langley's robust frame stiffened, his eyes darting towards Mrs. Miller. Monsieur Poirot, are you suggesting that Mrs. Miller is involved? Poirot shook his head gracefully. Not yet, Lord Langley. While Mrs. Miller's actions are intriguing, we must avoid jumping to conclusions without concrete evidence. Our investigation is still in its nascent stages. Mrs. Miller's stern demeanour wavered slightly, a flicker of concern passing through her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, my only loyalty lies with Lady Whitcomb, and the well-being of this household. Poirot offered her a reassuring smile. Your loyalty is noted, Mrs. Miller. However, we must remain vigilant, for appearances can often be deceiving. Mr. Blackwood finally spoke, his voice calm, yet edged with curiosity. Monsieur Poirot, your deductions are impressive. However, without clear evidence, we must tread carefully to avoid wrongful accusations. Poirot inclined his head in agreement. Indeed, Mr. Blackwood, the path to truth is paved with patience and meticulous examination. Let us proceed with diligence and an open mind. As the evening progressed, tensions in the room simmered beneath the surface, each guest acutely aware of Poirot's penetrating gaze and incisive questioning. The subtle clues and red herrings created a complex web of suspicion, keeping everyone on edge. Poirot excused himself from the table, making his way to the gallery once more. He examined the empty frame, his eyes narrowing as he noticed the slight loosening of the corners, a sign that the portrait had been removed with deliberate care. The rare cologne's scent lingered faintly, a clue that could either implicate or mislead. He approached the hidden passageway behind the bookshelf, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings that concealed the narrow corridor. A secret passage, he mused aloud, often a sanctuary for hidden agendas or clandestine activities. As Poirot retraced his steps, he pondered the significance of the threatening note. The unique ink was a vital clue, yet its true meaning remained elusive. He knew that the final pieces of the puzzle were still out there, waiting to be discovered. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot gathered his thoughts, contemplating the intricate relationships and concealed motives of each guest. The manor, with its opulent halls and hidden corridors, seemed to echo the complexities of human nature, where trust and deception danced in delicate balance. Lady Whitcomb approached him once more, her eyes filled with a mixture of anxiety and hope. "Monsieur Poirot, have you made any progress in your investigation?" Poirot offered her a reassuring smile. "Madame, we are steadily unraveling the threads of this intricate mystery. Each clue brings us closer to the truth, and with continued diligence, we shall soon illuminate the shadows that conceal the silent portrait's fate." As the night deepened and the manor settled into a hushed stillness, Poirot felt the gathering storm of evidence and emotions drawing him nearer to the heart of the enigma. The silent portrait's disappearance was no longer a mere act of theft. It was entwined with the very essence of Whitcomb Manor and its inhabitants, each holding a piece of the puzzle that would soon reveal the true nature of the crime. Chapter 8. The Revelation. The grand hall of Whitcomb Manor was bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, the long mahogany table now empty as the guests awaited Hercule Poirot's final revelation. The air was thick with anticipation, each person acutely aware that the moment of truth had arrived. Lady Beatrice Whitcomb stood gracefully at the head of the table, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier's light, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and anxiety. Poirot, impeccably dressed in his signature tailored suit, rose from his seat with a deliberate grace. His neatly groomed moustache twitched slightly as he surveyed the room, his sharp eyes meeting each guest's gaze in turn. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm and authoritative, "we have journeyed through a labyrinth of clues and red herrings, each leading us closer to the heart of this mystery. It is now time to unveil the truth behind the disappearance of the silent portrait." The guests leaned forward, their breaths held in collective suspense. Poirot paced slowly before the table, his mind weaving the intricate tapestry of evidence he had meticulously gathered. "Let us recall the key elements," Poirot continued. "We have a broken window latch, a hidden passageway, a changed security code, a threatening note, the faint scent of rare cologne, and footprints matching Mrs. Miller's shoes. Each clue, though seemingly disparate, forms a cohesive narrative when examined through the lens of logic and observation." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "Firstly, the broken window latch suggests an entry point, but as we established, there were no signs of forced entry. This points us towards someone with intimate knowledge of the manor's architecture, someone who could manipulate the latch without leaving evidence of a struggle." Poirot's gaze settled on Mrs. Agatha Miller, the steadfast housekeeper. "Mrs. Miller, your access to every part of this manor, coupled with the hidden passageway behind the bookshelf, provides you with the means to orchestrate such an act. Moreover, the footprints in the gallery matching your shoes cannot be mere coincidence." Mrs. Miller's composed exterior faltered for a brief moment, a flicker of unease crossing her features. "Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, I have always served Lady Whitcomb with the utmost loyalty." Poirot nodded thoughtfully before turning his attention to Mr. Victor Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood, Your presence here is indeed mysterious. Your claim to family assets provides a plausible motive. The rare cologne's scent aligns with your personal fragrance, suggesting your involvement. However, your silent demeanor masks deeper intentions. Mr. Blackwood met Poirot's gaze steadily, his inscrutable expression offering nothing. Monsieur Poirot, while I acknowledge my claim to the family assets, I assure you my intentions are not malicious. Poirot smiled gently, his eyes twinkling with understanding. Ah, but motivations often lie beneath the surface, Mr. Blackwood. The collaboration between you and Mrs. Miller indicates a shared interest in securing the portrait for yourselves. Mrs. Miller's access and your financial aspirations create a perfect alliance for such a scheme. Lady Whitcomb interjected softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. Monsieur Poirot, how could you be so certain? Poirot turned to her with compassion. Madame, it is through the meticulous examination of facts and the understanding of human nature that we arrive at the truth. The threatening note, penned with a unique type of ink found only in your study, implicates someone with privileged access, Mrs. Miller. The rare cologne, the carefully removed portrait, and the footprints all converge towards their complicity. Mrs. Miller's facade crumbled, her eyes welling with tears. It was not supposed to go this far, she confessed, her voice trembling. Lady Whitcomb refused to include me in the family legacy, dismissing my years of loyalty. Victor offered me a way out, and together we planned to sell the portrait discreetly. The threatening note was meant to divert suspicion, ensuring our scheme remained hidden. Mr. Blackwood stepped forward, his posture resigned. I did not intend for things to escalate, but circumstances forced our hand. We believed securing the portrait was the only way to secure our future. Poirot nodded solemnly. While your intentions may have been driven by desperation, the consequences of your actions have caused great distress. It is now time to face the repercussions of your deeds. Lady Whitcomb approached Poirot, her eyes filled with both gratitude and sadness. Monsieur Poirot, I am deeply saddened by this betrayal. Thank you for unveiling the truth. Poirot offered her a reassuring smile. Madame, justice has been served, and the portrait shall be returned to its rightful place. It is my hope that healing can begin for all involved. As Poirot concluded his revelation, the room fell into a heavy silence. Mrs. Miller and Mr. Blackwood were escorted away, their plans unravelled by Poirot's unerring intellect. The guests, though shaken, felt a sense of relief that the mystery had been resolved. Lady Whitcomb approached the empty frame of the silent portrait, a look of melancholy on her face. The portrait means more to me than words can express, she murmured, reaching out to touch the ornate frame. I am grateful for your assistance, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Madame, your patience and composure have been commendable throughout this ordeal. The portrait's return is a testament to your resilience. As the evening drew to a close, the manor exuded a newfound sense of calm. The shadows that once held secrets now seemed to recede, replaced by the soft glow of understanding and resolution. Poirot stood by the window, gazing out at the moonlit gardens, his mind already drifting towards the next mystery that awaited his keen intellect. Lady Whitcomb joined him, her presence serene. Monsieur Poirot, how can I ever repay you for your help? Poirot chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling with subtle humour. Madame, the greatest reward is seeing justice served and peace restored, but perhaps a glass of your finest wine would not go amiss. They shared a gentle laugh, the tension of the past days dissolving into the night. As the guests departed, their hearts lighter and their spirits lifted, Poirot felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Another mystery had been unravelled, another truth brought to light through observation, deduction, and the intricate dance of human nature. Whitcomb Manor, with its opulent halls and hidden secrets, had once again been a stage for Poirot's masterful unravelling of deceit. As he bid farewell to Lady Whitcomb, Poirot knew that his journey of solving mysteries was far from over, each case a new opportunity to delve into the complexities of the human soul.